This is the small chair that I'm sitting on for this video. Do you have half terms and a 6 weeks holiday when you home educate? And the short simple answer is no. But let's talk about why this is actually a good thing, as well as why you don't have to, and how it gives your family an incredible level of flexibility and freedom. A lot of us were brought up in the school system, so naturally when we think about education, we think in school terms, autumn term, spring term, half terms, and the summer holidays. And so now what parents have a struggle with something like the 6 weeks holiday is getting good childcare and also just having time off with our children too. And I mean, the other thing of that is also prices go up so much. So people are already financially just not having a good time. It is wild because most adults, most parents will have about 21 plus days off in a year. And that's like 3 weeks. I think it's important to kind of talk about something like that to show that school routines aren't sacred, they're just a system and systems can evolve. And I think it's important to remember and understand that school is just one way to access an education, and it's a structured institution that is designed to cater to hundreds of children at once. But when you home educate, you aren't necessarily replicating school at home. That is one of the biggest points and flexibilities in home education, is it's not meant to be school at home. There are obviously different structures you can take that might replicate school. I'm sure my background looks like a preschool room or corner of a school, but the routine and what you do with the structure doesn't have to look or be like the school routine. And the one thing that the current school system cannot do, and the one thing that home education can do and has an advantage and benefit of, is facilitating a learning journey that fits your child and your family. You don't need to take the half terms when schools are doing them. You don't even need to have half terms in a sense. You also don't need to take the 6 weeks holidays off if you don't want to, and that is the beauty of it. So I'm going to share a few examples as to why the school system isn't the holy grail of how children can learn and get an education and also have a childhood. So I think it makes sense to start with my own example since we home educate. And first of all, my daughter is 6 years old, so I think that already might have a bit of an influence on how we go about our home education. But we are very semi-structured, if not just very, very relaxed. But we do have a lot of learning stuff that we do, and it's not necessarily sit down and like times like, oh, you've got 45 minutes on this, now we need to move on. We do not do that at all. It's very free flowing and it's kind of just here and there. And because she's 6, she plays a lot and she's just basically finding herself at this age before moving on to really complex education. But yeah, going off when we get these breaks, it's kind of like an interesting one because we don't exactly look at, again, a school system and go, oh, they're all off at this time of year, we need to have a break. Because that's a bit weird, like we're not part of a school, so why would we follow that? When it comes to these main breaks and stuff, the funny thing is we tend to not do things because we just can't be bothered with all the school kids running around, and we can't be bothered with prices going up because we get the benefit and the advantage of having cheaper time outside of the house during school terms. So we really get to take advantage of that. And yeah, when it comes to the 6 weeks holiday especially, of course we are basically resting, but that's because it is kind of mirroring the fact that it's hotter, so you kind of just want to relax and just have fun and enjoy the fresh air. Our approach is mirroring my daughter's natural development. We don't necessarily separate her education from her childhood, basically. It just kind of flows. So for us personally, it's about tuning in to what we need in real time and in present time, which is essential for children's development because they live in the present. And it's not necessarily about what we need to be doing because a school's doing it. So another example I want to talk about are online schools. And this is an interesting one because they are obviously a type of school. They just aren't a traditional mainstream school. And online schools are getting more and more popular, and most of their students are home educated. So they will have their own unique individual approach to their curriculums and their routines. And there's one I want to talk about in particular that has always stuck in my mind, and it's one I'm quite interested in maybe signing my daughter up to. And I don't know if this will do it because I haven't been on their website for a while, but I just remember that their months were, they had 3 weeks on with the timetables and the classes, and then they would have 1 week off every single month. So 3 weeks on and 1 week off. And I think they still did like these kind of like half terms. And I do remember, I think anyway, that towards the end of the year, they had a longer time off compared to schools. And so when you enter something like an online school or like a learning hub or something for home educated kids, You obviously will follow that routine, but you've chosen it because it makes sense to your family's routine. And that's the thing, you wouldn't send your kid there if it didn't match your needs. But yeah, I think it's just important for me to share these examples to show you how very different it can be. And it's like the school system's overshadowed so much and it's clouded and conditioned so many people's minds that we don't think there's anything outside of it. And we've clearly got this structure because this is how children actually learn and develop. And it's like, it's actually interesting because it's probably the quite the opposite to how children naturally develop and also learn. Lots of kids actually thrive in it, but it's also like, why are we admitting that a lot of kids don't thrive in it and they have to just basically cope and struggle? Here's why that flexibility is powerful. You can follow your child's natural rhythm, so if they're deeply engaged in a project, you don't have to pause it because it's half term. You can take as many breaks throughout the year whenever you like, and you can also reduce burnout and stress this way, and you can spread out this rest time throughout the year instead of saving it all for the week in the half term or for the summer holidays. You can do it whenever it fits your family and your child's needs best. This kind of flexibility is actually also really, really beneficial and supports you as the parent and the facilitator of your child's education. If you're tired or overwhelmed or just dealing with things in life in general, it's okay to slow down. You are also a human, and so if you slow down, it's okay if your child slows down as well. If anything, it can usually mean more family time and more time to reconnect. And this is what I'm talking about with the flexibility. Like, it's okay if your child takes some time off. It's okay if you need to slow down. This is what family dynamics look like, and they should never be held up against a routine and these expectations and rigid rules where everyone starts kind of like having a bit of friction against it and everyone's trying to cope within that system, and then everyone gets burnt out and stressed and upset. And then there's so much pressure for children to have to start achieving and performing in a certain way just to prove that they're learning, and then it kind of breaks down the family dynamic and the real connection. The one thing that I think the school system has done so well in a very awful way is it's broken down family connection. And I think with home education you kind of start learning how to reconnect with your own family and family dynamics and what family means to you, because I think the school system's done a really insidious good job of disconnecting families, that when it does come down to resting and just recouping and reconnecting, we kind of don't feel comfortable and we don't know how to approach it, and we don't think it's okay to not be productive because we think too much about what it means in the future rather than just living and existing in the present. So another thing I want to highlight about home education is that it often mirrors the seasons naturally. A lot of families find that they slow down more in autumn and winter, and it just kind of makes sense anyway because the days are shorter, they're a lot more darker, the weather's cold, it's raining, it's horrible weather, so it makes you want to be more cozy. So it makes sense to lean more towards resting a little bit more, reflecting, and also more gentle learning. Then as spring and summer arrive, there's usually more energy and a lot more outdoor activities. So it makes sense, doesn't it, to kind of almost mirror the seasons, because naturally I really do think humans are supposed to be mirroring the seasons, and most times you do want to kind of stay back and be like, oh, I'll just take it easy because the weather's not nice. Naturally our bodies are kind of being like, oh, this isn't the best time to be out, but we're forcing ourselves into it more than we should be. You don't have to force productivity in winter just because the timetable says so, and so you don't have to wait until to July to let your child rest. That seasonal ebb and flow, honouring when it's time to go inward and when it's time to expand and reflect, is something that school systems often overlook, but something that home education can truly embrace. And I just want to be clear, choosing not to follow term time doesn't mean you never take breaks. Rest is essential. If it suits your family to slow down when the schools do, go for it. There's nothing wrong in doing it. This whole video isn't me saying, oh, if you home educate, you need to be doing the opposite. I'm just literally saying why it's not necessary to follow the school system when you home educate and it comes to term times. There are plenty of families that have mixed approaches to their children's education. So to make it easy, if there's 2 children in one household, one child is in school and one child is home educated, this is quite common and is not unheard of. I feel like some people only think it's school or home education and nothing in between. But this type of dynamic is very common, and it happens because one child is better off in school and the other child might not be best in school. There's nothing wrong in the mixed approach, but what would happen in that family is they would most likely be following the school routine because one kid is in school, so by the time they get time off, they can be with their family more. The point is it's through choice. It is your choice. If it suits your family, go for it. If it doesn't suit your family, you can change it up, and there's nothing wrong in doing so. I do want to quickly mention one of the biggest shifts that does happen when you start home educating and start learning a little bit more outside of the school system. And it's letting go of this idea that education only happens between the hours of 9 a.m. and 3 p.m, between Monday to Friday, and only during term time. Learning is not confined to a timetable. And when we're talking about children and their development, we need to take a step back and think, why have we made such a rigid structure, and who is it really serving? Because children are supposed to be free-flowing. Their brains do not work in the way that we're making them think that it does. We all now think children learn in this one way. So if you step away from that in something like home educating and you kind of start realizing you could be doing something a bit different and it actually suits your family's needs and your child's needs, you start feeling like you're doing something wrong. You start thinking, wait a second, aren't they supposed to be in spring term 1 learning ABC, and by next week they're supposed to be doing XYZ? And it's like, when you start doing that, it starts pushing and rushing children through their childhood and their learning. And we start creating expectations before they're ready, and we start giving them less autonomy in their own education. It doesn't have to always be this rigid structure and like always imposed by an adult and always timed by an adult and blocked off by an adult, but that's only to serve the adults more than the child. So if you're new to home education or thinking about starting it, this mindset shift does take time, and there is actually a word for this, and it's called deschooling, and it's absolutely normal to experience it. And it's not necessarily something you just experience once and then it's gone and you just kind of like, cool, whatever. I feel like it's something that you continue to go through for quite a while, because you've gone through probably yourself a dozen odd years of being in the school system and being surrounded by everything about the school system, that it's not just going to suddenly like leave your body within like a week of experiencing deschooling and being like, oh yeah, it doesn't have to be that way. It's something that you just, it's a really weird experience, because I'm constantly discovering things where I'm like, oh right, so like that's because of school and you don't have to do that because of school, or why do schools do that? It doesn't make any sense why schools do that. It's a really weird experience, and it's not like you have to home educate to experience it, but I feel like you will experience it a lot more when you start home educating. It still does depend on the structure that you go for, I'm not gonna lie, because there will be some parents who want a really strict structure, but on a whole, most home educators don't want to replicate school at home, so you will go through a deschooling period. And especially the parents whose kids have been in school already, the deschooling period is quite common for them to experience, because they've already been in school, now they're at home and learning a different way, that you kind of already got a system behind you to be like, right, my kid was doing this at this point, but you don't have to continue that if it's not going to work in that time. And at first you feel like you have to stick to a school-like structure because that's all you've known, or stay on track. And especially for the child who's being home educated now, was once in school and has just recently been deregistered, it's very, 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 very easy and extremely common to fall into this school-like routine. And it's most likely because you as the parent have been in school yourself, but also because that's all you've ever known anyway. Like, that's all you've ever been told, that's all you ever know about education, that it has to come from school, and how school does it is how everybody has to do it. It's a very crazy experience, because you kind of always have to kind of shake it off yourself to be like, whoa, 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 that's just my school mindset coming in there. But over time you start realizing that children don't stop learning just because there's no rigid timetable, and especially one that looks like school. And what's more interesting is that children learn best and more when they're curious and when they're relaxed, and when they're more free to explore on their own terms. When it's constantly adult imposed, it kind of chips away at that child's own understanding in their own existence and their own autonomy and own agency. It kind of is a constant reminder, a subconscious reminder even, not just a constant one, that somebody else, as in an adult, has to tell me what I need to be learning, when I can learn it, how I can learn it. Someone has to keep telling me, and it just doesn't make sense to me, because it's like, we're talking about a child's education here. That is their education, and school is supposed to be serving a child's education and not the other way around. It baffles me that we've got it flipped over, where children are supposed to be serving their education rather than the education is supposed to serve the child. And schools do this so well, where a child turns up, they're there for the school and for their education. Now they have to turn up with these expectations and they have to live by these expectations. But it's meant to be the way around because not every child is the same. So the education is supposed to serve that child individually and not everybody as one go. We have to always remember that school is not synonymous to an education. It does not mean the same thing. School is just a place or an institution to get an education, but education happens everywhere. It's happening constantly to children. They're always learning, even if you as an adult don't think they are. And I think school systems have done a really good job in a really insidious way to make us as adults, but also mostly as parents, to not see our children truly for who they are. We start viewing children through a school lens, and that starts getting very dangerous, where we start imposing so much on a child and we have so many expectations to a child and their education that we just don't think anything outside it can possibly exist. When you home educate, you're not replicating school at home. You're reimagining education in a way that works for your child and your life. You get to build a rhythm that suits your family dynamic, and that is definitely something worth celebrating. And that freedom is one of the best things you can ever experience in this journey when you are home educating. No matter what position you're in, whether you have kids or not, whether you're home educating, your kids are in school, whatever, but you're just on this video, just whatever it is, just please remember that school does not define an education, especially its break times, especially how long a child can learn for, what they can learn, when they can learn. It does not define it, and we need to stop defining an education and making it synonymous with school. It just doesn't make any sense. That is one of the worst things we have done in society, is we have just literally condensed it down into the school system and gone, this is the only way. So if you did enjoy today's video, please don't forget to give it a like and also drop a comment down below. And if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any more content like this from me. I'm done.